some very nice videos, clips on your website. And some people, you hear things, you grow up, you come out of your comfort zone and you hear something that you feel a bit uncomfortable, you feel sometimes even a bit guilty, some may be wrong. And you need to think about where you come from. But that's the way the dialogues are built, and that's important to have the dialogue. And when I hear many times, and part of what I do is, and being part of Chatham House, is to facilitate for dialogues behind the scenes, behind closed doors. People tell me, no, sometimes we don't want to meet others because it's normalization. And my answer to this, meetings and dialogues are not normalization. It's a safe place to discuss issues that we disagree. And we don't have to agree. We don't need to leave the room loving each other. Better we do, but if we don't, that's fine too. But as long as we understand the other side, we know where they come from, and we go home, we think about it, and we reflect. Because without it, without the grassroots work, I don't believe peace is possible. Because this brings me exactly to what I would like to talk today. Because when we talk about the Hinders, we need to look back and think 27 years after Oslo, next month is 27 years after Oslo. And a lot of us aged with Oslo. And we thought, hey, that probably I didn't expect to have meetings still talking about the need for peace. Thought we'll leave peace by now. Back in September 1993, we were sure that this is the beginning of the end. And in all these years, we see that there were missing parts there, the things that stopped the peace from taking place. And one of them is exactly the lack of dialogue on the grassroots level. There were not many of them, but they never filtered through to the leadership. They decided how peace should look like, but they didn't ensure that there is a critical mass. There was a critical mass. And I'm lucky enough to be in touch, to engage with many people involved from the negotiation, from Oslo and all the way there. And just out of curiosity, I asked them, where it all gone wrong? Because, those of us are old enough to remember September 1993 and the celebration and the signing and then the launch of the White House. And we thought, this will bring peace. There is no way back. And unfortunately, there was a way back and not a nice one. And that's what we have to learn. And a lot of the question I'm getting is peace possible? And my answer is always, everything is possible. The question, not if it's possible. I think it is possible. The question is whether it's probable. And how we make it probable. Because right now, I look around and I can't say it is probable for reasons that I will outline in a minute. And one of the things that worries me, and again, you mentioned that I write opinion pieces, and writing opinion pieces is living from one to the other and to see how crazy the world is going at the moment, and try to get your 2 pennies about why the world is so mad at the moment, and of course with the pandemic even more than that. And you see, part of what we see in the Middle East and between the Israel Palestinians reflects the zeitgeist that we live in, which doesn't actually allow us to do things, to a fair and just solution, but also one that is durable, because it's not part of the discourse. And that's one of the major difference between now and 1993. And again, I don't want to become too nostalgic about 1993. It has its faults. And as one of the architects of Oslo told me more than once, look, Oslo was never a peace agreement. Oslo was a declaration of principles. Some leader wanted a big celebration and forgot that the devil was in the details. And instead of actually working on peace agreement, we first announced it, first celebrated it, and then said, oh, what were we doing next? So that's definitely not a way to reach a peace agreement. But at least there was goodwill. And if I'm going to 93 because from the failure there, but there were also successes, I think we can learn what we can do better. And I don't, you know, by the end of today, I don't want to leave anyone pessimistic. I want us to be realistic about the options, but at the same time understand that I think the working assumption should always be that all wars come to an end, all conflicts come to an end. The question is how much hardship, how many casualties are on the way, but not whether they come to an end. There is no single conflict that hasn't. And one of the things, so the zeitgeist is not the one of 1993. 1993 was post-Cold War. 1993 was a young president in the White House that looked for an achievement, Bill Clinton. I know now he's down to 5 minutes on the Democrats convention, but he was an important person back then. In 1993, there was an Israeli prime minister that promised in the election of 1992 that within 6 months he would achieve agreement. And in 1992, there was the PLO that was desperate for recognition after the big misjudgment of the Kuwait affair and supporting Saddam Hussein. So in many ways, you have to accept that there are the conditions that are always there, but there was also the stars needs to be aligned in favor of peace. It all needs to fall into place. Otherwise, it falls apart. And this happened in 1993. And we are not now there, but it doesn't mean, because we have election soon in the United States. It looks different than what it looked 6 months ago, who might win the election in the United States. The political situation in Israel, which I'll talk a little bit later, and I'm sure there will be few questions about it in the Q&A. And we need to look also the disunity among the Palestinians. All of those don't help the situation. And another big hindrance is, of course, the issue of lack of honest broker. And in ideal world, we would like to see the Israelis and Palestinians reach the conclusion, we don't want peace. We don't want war, sorry, oops, the slip of the tongue. We don't want to live in a state of war forever. And they would just sign an agreement because they know exactly what are the terms of an agreement, of a peace agreement. It's not a big secret. You see, however we look at the main issues of self-determination for both, for borders, refugees, settlements, Jerusalem, the parameters are exactly the same parameters. They haven't changed in the last 27 years. Some of that need adjustment. But the basic right of both for self-determination, Israel is a Jewish state, and Palestine is a state of the independent state of the Palestinians, hasn't changed. Jerusalem is the capital of both. Whether the Americans moved the embassy to Jerusalem or not, so they moved. It's not going to change the fact that only durable peace agreement will be one, the Jerusalem, part of Jerusalem is also the capital of Palestine, of independent Palestine. And it doesn't mean that you need to divide Jerusalem. You know, I'm sure many of you have been to Jerusalem. No one wants to see walls. Well, there are walls, ancient walls there. We don't need new ones there. Actually, what divides now is the wall, the security wall, or however you would like to call it. This separates actually in Jerusalem. The fact that not many Jews are actually going to East Jerusalem to visit. That's create the conflict divides Jerusalem, not a peace agreement that will have the capital above. The issue of refugees is central to all of it. And my worry, and I've been involved part of project at Chatham House, but also with advising UNRWA for many years, is the issue of refugees is sidelined. And this is, I think, one of the biggest mistakes, and it can be a major hindrance to any peace agreement. Registered with UNRWA today, around 5.5 million refugees, Palestinian refugees. They are between the West Bank and Gaza, and Syria, and Lebanon, and Jordan. Some of them have other citizenship, many of them don't. Many live in refugee camps, some don't live in refugee camps. But the thing that can't be ignored is that they have rights. And they have the rights of refugees. An international convention established the right of return. Now, I don't suggest that in a peace agreement, there will be an agreement which will allow all Palestinian refugees to go back to live inside Israel. It's not doable. Whether I like it or not that people can't live everywhere, this is a different matter. But the reality is on the ground is that there won't be a peace agreement. Israel will never release them. But should be a just and fair solution for refugees. And right now we'll see, for instance, the United States cut all funds to UNRWA. And UNRWA became kind of the organization that everyone is bashing in the international community. By the way, the Palestinians too. So I can tell you, it's not a perfect organization. But if you take UNRWA outside the equation, there won't be education in many places. There won't be shelter in many places. There won't be health service in many places. There won't be microfinance in places like Gaza or the West Bank or in Jordan, because no one else is ready to step in. And in all my conversation with heads of UNRWA along the years, they've said, we wish no one needed us. No one wants to be a head in a perpetuity of a refugees organization, because the longer the organization exists, it means the longer there is a refugee issue. So it's the same with UNHCR. Probably the happiest days to the people who work on refugees when you don't need them. You won't need them anymore. But this is not the situation. Actually, the number of refugees is greater than ever since 1945. So in this sense, you need to address the issue of refugees. Now, there is a lot of scaremongering, and that's, I think, why dialogues are so important. The scaremongering in Israel, oh, if you just have an agreement about refugees, all the refugees, Palestinian refugees will go and live in Israel. And if you look at the facts, and the last serious survey, opinion poll conducted by Professor Halil Shikaki from Ramallah, shows that only 10% of the Palestinian refugees would like to go and live back in Israel, where it's now Israel. Now it makes sense why Palestinians will prefer to live in a Jewish state instead of an independent Palestinian state. So most of the Palestinians, either in the diaspora or in the West Bank and Gaza, would like to live either in independent Palestine or the swapped land, which will be also part of independent Palestinian state. And those if you read again the alarming right-wing newspapers that everyone wants to go and live in Europe, in Australia, in the United States, only 2 to 3% of Palestinian refugees said they actually do want to move outside the region. So apparently we are not as attractive as we think we are. And again, for all sorts of reasons, whether it's family ties, the weather, the connection to the land, you name it, people want to stay where they are. Many of the Palestinian refugees, bear in mind you have third and fourth generation of Palestinian refugees that want to stay in the host countries. They want to stay in Lebanon. They want to stay in Jordan. Some of them Jordanian citizens. So they would like to stay where they are. They don't want to move. So you need to address this issue as well with the host countries, and people should be compensated for lost properties. So this is the refugees, and I really think that the fact that we don't hear much about it, it doesn't mean that it's not one of the most important issues. And if it's not resolved, it's a huge hindrance of achieving peace. And if it's not addressed in a fair and just manner, it means there will be another group of people that will be resentful and won't accept the peace agreement. Then you have the issues of the settlements. And we can't ignore the issue of the settlements. The settlement changed completely the landscape. And I managed just to get twice in December to Israel and Palestine. I was mainly one of the tours. I was a tour with human rights organization inside in the Palestinian territories. And it's not pretty what's happening there, especially with the settlements, and specifically with certain settlements. Now it will be unrealistic, whether again we like it or not, to remove all the settlements. But reality, there are now around 600,000 settlers. In any peace agreement, whether you look at Camp David, or the Olmert Abu Mazen, or the Yossi Beilin Abu Mazen, or the Geneva Initiative, any of these initiatives, and I know probably you expect me to say something about the great Trump peace plan. I'll try to avoid, but I might even say something. Because it's not peace and it's not plan, but we can talk about it. But the more serious approaches, the Clinton parameters of 2001, sorry, the Camp David, I think the most serious one was actually the Abu Mazen Olmert, was very close, but the timing, again, timing is everything. This was the wrong timing. Most of the settlers, not the settlements, most of the settlers will stay within Israel, because most of the settlements are either close to the Green Line, to the borders with Israel, or in blocks of settlements. And I think this will remain the case. The settlements that should be removed from are the more isolated ones. So the idea that around 10% of the West Bank will be annexed, but not annexed in the way that Netanyahu wants now. Annexed as part of an agreement, as part of swap of land. Now, it's not easy, it's problematic. I have my doubts, by the way, because I think that should be more movement of settlements and removal, sorry, of settlements, because I think certain isolated settlements that might sell are going to create issues, let's put it like this, because they won't accept the peace agreement. Now, it needs to be addressed. One of, again, I won't mention name because it's recorded, but one of the architect of Oslo that we tried to do some work on the issue of confederation thinks that the way forward is a confederation. And a confederation means that everyone stays in the same place, but you declare the Green Line as the border between or thereabout, between Israel and Palestine. There is a Palestinian state and Jewish state, Israel. And if you live as a Jewish settler in Palestine, you're still an Israeli citizen, but you abide by the Palestinian law. So there is a movement there of people, and you don't need to move everyone, as long as you abide by the law. In a way, part of the modality of this is the modality of the European Union. I know this is the union that we used to belong to until quite recently, which we decided it's not good enough for us here. But the idea that if you're a EU citizen that live in the UK, for instance, the law that apply to you are the British, or if you as a British go and live in Spain or live in another country, the Spanish law, but you still stay as a citizen of your country of origin, unless you decide to change. So this is part of the idea. Now, if you look at the territory is tiny. And we need to look also at the economic situation. And another, which for me, in one way it can be an hindrance, and on another day it can be an incentive, is economic development. Because if you look at the economies, and I have to refer to three economies, because there is the Israeli economy, there is the Gaza economy, and there is the West Bank economy. And they are all three of them very different from one another. But with the right investment, people can travel very quickly from one place to another. I don't assume, I know that it's probably will take less time to get from Gaza to work anywhere in Israel than it takes me supposedly I live in London to get the office in the university. This is the one that I haven't seen. I haven't seen for 6 months now, but in principle, it takes like an hour to get from Wimbledon to Regents. With fast trains, you can be much faster to get from Gaza to Tel Aviv, definitely to Ashkelon or any other place, or from the West Bank to get in anywhere else. Now, there is no reason that will be also movement to work from the opposite direction if you build industrial parks. One of the things that we try to work, and of course, what the hindrance is in Israel right now, the discourse, everything is security. So if you ask the security people until 2 years ago, why there is only 2G in the West Bank? And they say security. I said, so I asked senior security people, what's the difference in security between 2G, 3G, and 4G? I'm not a technical person. And said, yeah, make it easier communication. Reality, it makes no difference. It's actually an economic interest of some of the networks not to allow this within the West Bank. It's more an economic. So we need to look at the economics. We need to, for instance, to see how Palestinians in turns can go to the highly developed high-tech in Haifa, in Herzliya, and in other places. They're in Palestine, in places like Jest, in East Jerusalem. They're in Ramallah. They're hubs of high-tech hubs. They're just waiting for the opportunity and for the condition to change. And if you improve economic conditions. Now, this is different from Kushner. From Gerard Kushner, everything, if you just have the Palestinians will have better economic and living conditions, they won't look for self-determination. This is an illusion. It's a dangerous illusion. Improving economic conditions can go hand in hand with political solution, because here is another element which can be a hindrance or can be a great support of peace, which is the term trust. Now, right now, both sides don't trust each other. Even worse than that, Hamas and Fatah doesn't trust each other. And within Israel, if you follow the news, and I'm sure you do, if you look at the demonstration in Israel and you see what happened in the Knesset, so the two leaders of the two alternating prime minister have zero trust between them. So how do we expect them to trust also the other side? So all the political systems, and you have three of them, even if you take the one that is outside, suffers from severe, acute lack of trust. And there is no peace without trust, because in any peace agreement, you see, sometimes I think there were two mistakes done, one by the right and one by the left in Israel. And despite belonging to the peace camp in Israel for many, many years, I think they got it wrong sometimes. They say, oh, there is no risk in signing agreement. No, you sign peace agreement despite the risks. Everyone takes risk in a peace agreement because you make compromises. And I think the idea of a peace, of any agreement, by the way, one of the classes that I'm teaching is negotiation, is not that everyone is happy by the end of the negotiation, but everyone is equally unhappy. Because it means, because if you are ready to give up something, it means you didn't want it to begin with. But the basic intent of this conflict, both believe genuinely that the entire territory belongs to them. The rest is a working compromise. Why? Because peace is more important than territory. Avoiding bloodshed is more important than having the entire territory to yourself. Because dialogue and cooperation and prosperity and security can be achieved only when both sides work together. It's not because you should expect that the Palestinian will think no, or convert into Zionism and says, yeah, the Zionist idea is wonderful. We should have thought about this before. Or that the Jewish Zionists will say, oh yeah, of course a Palestinian state. That is our dream, to have a Palestinian state and not to be in control or have the sovereignty over Hebron or even part of East Jerusalem. This is not the point. Had it been that easy, We could have signed it long time ago. But the hindrance here, the obstacle, is because both of them believe that the entire territory is there. Well, some even take it further, believe that Jordan is also part of the equation. But let's leave, this is a small minority. It's then when you reach a compromise because you set higher priority on peace and coexistence and justice and fairness, which is the only way to have a durable peace. I think I'm reaching the end of my 25 minutes. And just to wrap it up in this, and to leave.
I was going to say, you can continue, you've got, don't worry.
That is that right now, it's because, and I think for organizations like yours, for think tanks like Chatham House and other, organizations that deal with peace and conflict resolution, is to stop thinking in terms of conflict management. There is not only a problem between the Israelis and the Palestinians. There is something which has to do with the psyche of conflict, that we moved from resolution along the last 30, 40 years, even before, from conflict resolution to conflict management. So we are almost satisfied with conflict management. You look at issues like Kashmir, or you look even in Bosnia. I had a project in the Balkans, so I was lucky enough to travel a little bit in the Balkans. And I just realized that the Israeli-Palestinian is not the most convoluted conflict in the world. I found it's more complex even in the Balkans. And I realized, yeah, they don't like each other very much there. Well, I knew a bit about it, but I didn't realize how much they dislike each other. And what you have in Bosnia right now is sort of conflict management because they don't deal with the root causes of it. They don't treat with, again, what your organization is doing is bring people together and educating them for peace. To understand that, yes, part of life is making these painful compromises that help you to move on. And again, I was involved in supporting another great organization called, the Bereaved Family Circle. And one of the things which it's when I saw your work, I said it's exactly what Robbie Dumlin, who was one of the figureheads of this organization, who was a very good friend, told me many times, one of the problems, a lot of foreign countries import the conflict into their society and they're fighting this conflict in their countries instead of helping us to resolve it. What help would come out of you fighting the same fight that we fight over there, instead of trying actually to help us to find a solution? So I think education, and both societies don't educate their young one for peace. And my worry right now with, again, I started and probably I'll finish with that to allow enough time for Q&A, is the zeitgeist of nationalism and populism doesn't allow space to see the other side, to recognize that the other side has the same rights as I have, that the other side has the same pain that I do. And only when you move through this. Now, and this brings me to them where Oslo failed. Oslo failed because it was an agreement between governments and not between people. It was an agreement that didn't realize that you need critical mass. You might be right, and no doubt that the people, again, spending many, many hours with the people that, well, I know how well-intentioned they were. But at the same time, it was an agreement almost between elites, but not between people. And that's one of the major hindrances. It's the psychological one of how you move from war to peace. And I probably should finish here. Thank you. And open to questions.
Thank you so much, Yossi. I think we have a question. We've got a raised hand as far as I can see. So we'll go straight into questions. I'm going to try and look who raised the hand. I think it was Zachariah. So I'll just unmute you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, you're unmuted, Zach, so go ahead with your question.
It probably sounds like there's a kettle in the background. I don't know if my headphones quite messed up, but I hope you can just bear with that. But two questions. What do you think about the one-state solution? What's your opinion on that? And can you explain a bit about the, I forgot, it was Ozzy? I'm not sure who was one of the leaders that you spoke about and what he did. If you could just speak a bit about that, because I'm not quite familiar. Thank you.
I didn't catch the second question, sorry.
Zach, can you just respond? Can you repeat your second question?
Yes, thank you. Yes, one of the latest agreements that you spoke about that didn't take place.
Oslo.
Yeah, Oslo. Sorry, there you go, Oslo.
Oh.
Yeah, if you could just, because I'm not familiar with that, and I think a few others aren't.
Okay.
If you could just give just a very brief background on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall I take it?
Sure. Yes, yeah. Please.
Yeah. One state solution is a nice idea because it's based that we all can live in peace with one another and we can overcome our differences. I don't see it's happening, not in our generation. You see, you have two national movements, the Zionist movement and the Palestinian movement, that were fighting with one another to fulfill their national aspiration. One managed to fulfill this aspiration, the second one is still waiting for this to happen. Practically, how do you move from this conflict? What is one state solution? That you have one constitution, one legal system, one government, one flag, one parliament, one political system, one education system. Is this really after, it's not only 72 years of conflict, it's more than 100 years of conflict. Can we really move to do that? Especially the time both the Israeli society and definitely the Palestinian societies are so divided. So in ideal worlds, or even idealistic, where we see that people can live in peace and within one system, but it's not going to happen. If it's ever going to happen, I think it's first to need to go through a two-state solution that both sides learn to live side by side without conflict, coexistence. Now, when I said, I think there should be two-state solution in a one-state reality. And when I said, you know, you can see the economic cooperation, the cultural cooperation, tourism. You don't need to see big walls and big fences there, and it should be freedom of movement. And you should see how the economies integrate for the benefits of everyone. But the symbolic side of it, and learning also to run a country outside the conflict, which I think both political entities, both people need to learn to run their political entities, their states outside the conflict. And then, I don't know, in 50 years, 100 years, they feel that what's the point in having two different states? You know, inshallah. As for the Oslo Agreement, you know, it was an idea. The people met there in Oslo. They were not even officials. The prime minister didn't know. The United States knew more than some people attribute to it. They knew quite a bit of what was going on. And they explored the idea of how we move from state of conflict to peace. And when they came eventually, the people they negotiate, and some of them were not elected officials. They were academics, they were members of the PLO, but not elected member of Knesset, not elected member of the PNC, and so on and so forth. And eventually, when they went to Rabin, for instance, to Arafat with this agreement, both agreed that that's the beginning of something. But the agreement itself was supposed to begin with 5 years negotiations by 1988. This was 1993, that by 1998, all the outstanding issues that I mentioned, border settlements, and there were not that many settlements at the time, Jerusalem is the capital, all of them would be resolved. But this, of course, never happened. And since then, there was the Camp David that failed in 2000, July 2000, which unfortunately was followed by the Second Intifada. Then the Abu Mazen-Olmert agreement, basically, I mentioned, was the closest to an agreement. But on this occasion, the two things: A, Olmert was already on the way out, and Abu Mazen got cold feet. And this is not a good combination for peace. And since then, there was, I don't think, any serious. The John Kerry initiative, it was well-intentioned, but John Kerry, with all his good intentions, and Obama in this sense, were not ready to carry all the weight of the American administration, to put the weight on the negotiation side. So this is what the United States want. And in my mind, I think that's what both sides wanted, that the United States will push them to the finishing line, but it was not the Obama administration style.
I think our next question's from Michael Hilton. And then we can see Bernard, and it looks like Zach's happy with that answer. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Michael?
Can't unmute.
You can now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Warren. Thank you, Yossi, for that fascinating talk. I think it's the most sensible talk I've heard about the Israel-Palestine conflict since I was actually there with FODIP. It's now nearly 2 years since I was on the FODIP trip. And looking back at it from that distance, one of the memories that stays with me most vividly is the politicization of archaeology, which we saw in Hebron, we saw it especially in Silwan, in a lesser degree in other places as well. You said quite a lot about the present and the future. My question is, can we build peace without also coming to terms with the past? When we have people who feel it's their religious duty, not just to live in the land, but to live as close as they can physically get to an archaeological site from 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, how do we deal with that? And how do we build more reasoned and sensible attitudes to the history of both sides?
Thank you, Michael. First of all, thank you for your kind words, and I hope you won't have to wait another 2 years for a sensible talk about the topic. That's way too long. But this is a great question: is how do we deal with it? And I think that's exactly why organization like this one is so important. You don't need to change the past. The past is the past. And of course, there are versions of it, and there are narratives that are developed. And as we know, I don't know if everything that he says in the Old Testament actually happened, and I don't want to sound inappropriate in what I'm saying here, but this is the narrative. And people believe in this narrative, that's fine. And I think that maybe subconsciously I ignore to an extent the past because I'm geared. I'm not an historian. I'm a political scientist, so I'm trying to look for solutions. I try to move forward. I don't want. Also, again, I don't like to mention that. Again, I'm second generation Holocaust survivors, and I don't live with this. I know it. It's part of what shapes me and shaped me. Believe in human rights. Believe in equality of human being, believe that no one has the right to commit atrocity against any other human being, but I don't want it to overtake my life or to take over my life. And I want to move forward in a way that we look at now. But at the same time, we need to make a separation between the past without denying people their history in the past. It's not enough to take a Palestinian, forget about the Nakba. It took place 72 years ago, it's gone. In a sensitive way to recognize it and to work with it towards a solution which is satisfactory, which should fulfill the minimum requirement. Again, I've been in so many, track 1.5 and track 2 negotiations. And when people say about the right of return, I said also the Palestinians a bit kind of half teasing them and said, listen, if I were you, I will never negotiate the right of return because I never negotiate my rights. Rights are rights. You negotiate the practice of return, not the rights of return. Because you have a right as a refugee to go back. Now, the practicality, even those who told me I have still the key, I said, I know you have the key, but you don't have the house. The house doesn't, it's not that I'm trying to be smart aleck. The house doesn't exist physically. There is no lock. So we need to move with that, but probably I should have mentioned this in my talk, is we need also truth and reconciliation. And this is the way to deal with the past. You need to acknowledge people's history, to acknowledge people's pain, to acknowledge the loss that they suffer. One needs to acknowledge the fears. Again, that's again a bond that I have with the left in Israel. When they say, oh, you're just fear-mongering. People are entitled to their fears. Look at the life we live now in the time of coronavirus. There is a lot of fear around. Some of it more rational, some of it sometimes less rational, but fear. It's part of us human beings. We have fears. So to tell people, oh, you shouldn't be afraid. People are afraid of the dark. No one ever been attacked by the dark. But to tell people, don't be afraid of it, we're not going to help them. So dealing with your history, with your narratives is important, as long as you don't take over a realistic approach towards solution. And this is the trick. And I think in this, and again, I had the great privilege to meet Desmond Tutu. And this was exactly the conversation. How did you do that? How do you manage to bring people into this Truth and Reconciliation Commission? And Party said it's part of our culture. It's a cultural thing of the Ubuntu that you teach people, that's forgiveness. And part of it is just to show the humanity towards the other side. And but again, just one point, if you deal with the Middle East, everywhere that you dig, you talk about archaeology, you'll find something. I just read the news today that while building the light train in Tel Aviv, they found graves. Now, I'm not surprised. Everywhere you dig in Israel and Palestine, you find piece of history. And I highly recommend to you, watch a short film by Larissa Sansur, who is a Palestinian director, half Russian, half Palestinians. And she has a short film which is beautiful about what happened if a UFO lands in a place and finds some archaeological excavation that they think belongs to their ancestors. Do they have the right to claim it? Of course, it looks like science fiction, but definitely it was not science fiction. There was a message there, but it's very well made. I hope it answers your question.
Thanks, Yossi. Bernard, would you like to ask a question, please?
Thanks, Warren. Yossi, thanks so much. I've really enjoyed it and really getting to grips with the mix of political reality, but more importantly, the human emotion that's experienced on a micro level, while many people deal with this only on a macro level, which is where my question is going. Would Fatah agree to move towards a significant peace agreement with Israel without Hamas? And if they did, what do you expect Hamas's position to be? And would it be likely to change if the peace agreement between Fatah and Israel managed to get somewhere? Zero.
Thank you. Thank you. Very two good question. I'm not so sure I have an answer, but I'll try to take it. There's central question there. I don't think there is a peace agreement if you don't try to bring as many as possible elements within the conflict. I don't think that Hamas is the same Hamas that was in 1987, and I just wrote, I think, like 10 days ago, a piece about the recent exchange of hostilities between Israel and Hamas. Hamas has matured in a way. It's not in the place maybe I would like it to see, and I'm not a great fan of fundamentalist movement, as you can imagine, but it's a part of life. Hamas, let's remind ourselves, one election, free and fair elections back in 2006. Now, the elections, the observers never said that it was not fair and free elections. Now, do I like the way that they control Gaza? No. Do I like their attitude to a lot of issues, from gender to human rights? Obviously not. I don't like their firing rockets, but they're a fact of life, and we need to learn how to talk to them. I think part of their maturity right now is that you see they're trying to engage with Israel. They actually agreed with Israel about something, and Israel is actually hesitant. So we need to explore it. But first and foremost, it's almost impossible for the Fatah and the Hamas not to find common ground. They're the same people. They are Palestinians. And I tell my Palestinian friends, I actually wrote it in a piece that just came 2 days ago. When the Palestinians complain about the agreement with the UAE, yeah, and I think that we need to look at it. And if it's about abandoning the Palestinians, I think this would be the wrong move. However, if the Palestinians are marginalized, they need to take stock as well, why it happened. And part of it, for me, is the weakness as a result of their disunity. They're not taking seriously because they are so disunited. Because the West Bank and Abu Mazen became so authoritarian and doesn't function. And the Hamas is the Hamas, and they can't even agree. I don't think they should have a unity government. Unity government is a kind of Western idea that about non-Western countries. No, they need an opposition, and they need a coalition. They need a government, need a position. That's what democracies are all about. But they need to be part of any future negotiations, because in this, if they won't be included, they will make the right noises that you will remember that they exist. And it's not, look at the Irish example. Yes, you need the real IRA or the continuity IRA, but they are very small. They're very tiny. They're a nuisance, but a nuisance that one can live with. Rather not, but they won't really hamper the peace agreement. This is not the case with the Hamas. Again, I suggested you'll follow the surveys, the opinion polls by Khalil Shikaki, and you see the Hamas steady 40%, 45% support the Hamas. So it's not that it's a small group. And it's not that Palestinians that support the Hamas are the ones that want a war with Israel. It's because they are disillusioned with peace. They are disillusioned with the economic and conditions. They are disillusioned with the Fatah and the corruption that at least used to be there. So they look for other solutions. Now they're disillusioned also with the Hamas. So if you are a Palestinian, you ask yourself, who am I not disillusioned with? And the international community does almost zero for them. And this is an unhealthy situation that can lead to more extreme movement than the Hamas. And then hence why I think actually an inclusive negotiation is so important.
Just a quick follow on from that, and then I'll be quiet, okay? You spoke about the zeitgeist, which is not in the right position to facilitate this. What do we need to start the process of changing the zeitgeist so that the Arab zeitgeist and the Israeli zeitgeist and the Western zeitgeist is all moving in the same direction?
The world is not moving into the direction of reconciliation, of understanding of one another. We have the occupant of the White House. I tried to kind of delay talking about Trump, but I think it's inevitable. At one point, I will have to that lives on friction, lives on antagonism. So it's China, it's Russia, it's somewhere, it's refugees, it's Iran. So it doesn't understand the basic tenets of diplomacy. I not might like what other countries do, but I need to learn how to live with them, how to reach some sort of workable formula or solution with them. And that's not what's happening right now. One of the things, and 3rd of November can be a sort of a game changer. When the American election do take place, it's not only what happens in the presidential election, also what happens. The House probably will be taken by the Democrats, but see if what happened in Senate. That's, I think, really important. So this is one of the things that it can change. You see, I must admit, I'm two minds about the agreement with the UAE. It depends what is done with it. If this normalization is signed for all the Gulf states, you know what, the Palestinians is not a high priority for us, and it's not a high priority because Iran is higher priority, economic cooperation, relations with Washington more important. But at least it's kept some interest in the Palestinian issue, and they have more leverage towards Israel, and also make Israel more confident. That's, you know, the idea that everyone hates us in the region, no one likes us, everyone wants to throw us to the sea, you know, all of this kind of thing. So no, actually we have quite few friends around us. And they cooperate with us on intelligence, on security, economically. But I think that's we need, again, to go back to the zeitgeist, you need also the Israeli electorate to change its view, to grow more confident. Again, in my visits sometimes and talking to my friends in Israel, sometimes I'm in despair. Because when they talk, you have to understand we fear for our lives. It's dangerous area. I said, you're the most powerful state in the region. You cooperate with Egypt and Jordan. They have the longest borders. You have peace agreement. With Egypt, complete strategic cooperation, military cooperation. The Saudis, the Bahrain, the Qatar, name one by one, actually work with you behind the scene. Now the Emirates are actually doing that in the broad day of life. So it's also to build this confidence within the Israel electorate that they can take risks. And I think then you can start changing it. But there is, again, something in Israeli politics that above everything, and it's called the corruption trial of Netanyahu. And until this is not resolved, the incitement against the Palestinians, by the way, not only in the West Bank in Gaza, but also inside Israel. People like Ayman Ouda and the rest of the Joint Arab List. This will continue because he thinks this is one of his stay out of jail cards, which is not helpful. But I'm in the middle of writing a piece about when going to be fourth election in Israel. So this might change a little bit.
That's
Yes, the mind boggles, the fourth election, which seems to be more and more on the cards. Next question from Caroline, please, and then David. So Caroline next.
Hi, hello. Oh, okay. I've got two questions. The first is, you mentioned a land swap, 10% will stay. So what stay with Israel, but what 10%, what equivalent is Israel willing to give up? Because it's no good giving them 10% of the Negev and not giving them any of the Galilee. So what is this being discussed, and is there real land swap possibility there? Second question was really similar to Michael's, which is, what do you do with the demographic in Israel has changed so much over the last 30 years, and you have people who fundamentally believe that Judea Samaria is theirs. how do you begin to talk to people like that, which are a frighteningly large majority, is my impression, in Israel?
Thank you, Caroline. Let me take it one by one. The land swap was all in all during the Camp David negotiation, and then in Taba in 2001 and later. All we are talking about equivalent of 96% of the West Bank and Gaza. We are talking also about connecting Gaza and the West Bank, either by tunnel or a road or a bridge. Each of them has their own advantages and disadvantages and also costs, but one or the other. Now, it's definitely not, we're not talking, by the way, in the Galilee. The Galilee is part of Israel proper, but we are talking about West Bank vis-a-vis the Negev. Some of it, we're talking about equivalent in quality of land, if you like. The good things in the 21st century, you see, if you go back to the partition plan in 47, that agriculture was the main source of income, it would have been different. These days, and again, I happen to be exactly 15 years ago in Gaza during the disengagement. I don't know what possessed me to want to be in Gaza during the disengagement, but I thought it was interesting. So this was my summer holiday, spending a week in Gaza and then in the West Bank. It was very interesting. And I spoke to all sorts of people. And, you know, the greenhouses, for instance, in Gaza, in the settlements, unfortunately, they didn't keep them. But this is a source of income. And with modern agriculture, the agrotechnology, sorry, and high tech, you definitely can build a viable, I think one of the tragedies of Israel is not developing the Negev enough. This was the big dream of David Ben-Gurion, to have more people moving to the Negev and developing the Negev. So maybe actually a peace agreement will be the savior of the Negev, but I don't think it's not viable as such, as long as you put all the resources there. Not just send people to the deserts and, you know, fend for yourself, but a real plan with all the resources and the know-how how to do that. So then that's, I think it's doable. I think the demography is an issue. And President Rivlin talked once about the tribes of Israel in a speech. And you see that the fastest growing communities in Israel are either the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox, and the Israeli Palestinians. They are the fastest growing. I'm not so sure that the settlers have so much influence. They managed to get themselves at the heart of Israeli politics, but numerically speaking, I don't think that as many as they are noisier than big in numbers. And that was their great success. You see, I'm taking my hat off to the settlers, the way they managed to manipulate. I don't like it, but the way they managed to manipulate an entire country to invest in something which is basically shooting the country in the foot, if not in the head, by building all these settlements, and now try to find a peace solution around the settlements. It had been so much easier had the settlements not been there. But I think still, and I think it's a miracle, because again, the only thing for me to go by our public opinion poll surveys, and if you look at the peace index and other indices, says still there is 50% of Israelis, despite everything that happened since 2000, that support a two-state solution. And around 46, 47 among the Palestinians. So I think if there is a big move, something tangible, a peace initiative, not again the Trump plan, which is ridiculous, something serious, I think these numbers will move up. And the settlers, again, one of the myths that the settlers manage to build is they're going and going and going. They don't grow as much as they're expected. They're bigger than it's comfortable for a peace agreement, but demography in the settlements, we are not so sure if there are not more people leaving the settlements than joining the settlements right now. So I think in this sense, you see that there are big moments in history when leaders, and that's what's lacking, leadership, they take forward. I think this will persuade enough people that peace is better than than keeping the territories.
Thanks, Yossi, and thanks for the question, Caroline. Dave, would you like to ask your question, please?
Thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Can you hear me very well?
Fascinating discussion. Thank you, Yossi. I wanted to ask if you could elaborate a little bit more on the notion of confederation. Is there much traction there? Is there any ownership by vested interests, or is it something that's perhaps that much further away from reality? Do you think there is some real potential in confederation?
You know, when it was presented to me, I was doubtful what it meant. Because if I was not so sure where its confederation stand between one-state solution and two-state solution. Is it sort of a hybrid? And not a good hybrid. A hybrid that no one will know where they stand about it. And then I realized that most people that did some work on it talk about a two-state solution, but trying to resolve the major issue mainly of moving population from one side to the other. And to avoid having hard border, having borders but not hard borders, enable people also to move for work, for tourism. Again, bear in mind, David, that you have many Palestinians, especially children, never been to the Mediterranean Sea, never seen the beach. That's how terrible it is for them. And the idea that one day, yes, you just can go from the West Bank in 30 minutes, depends where you live. You can actually be in Tel Aviv and Jaffa in the same, for Israelis to go to Hebron and Nablus and any other place. So the confederation is mainly the idea you have to stay, but at the same time, you keep the settlements when they are. The legal system should be clear that where you live, you're under the jurisdiction of the state where you live. It's unquestionable. But at the same time, I must admit, I think there is something in it, but I need to see more evidence about. And one of the things that we started, you know, before the coronavirus, together with some institution to raise funds, actually, to have some workshop and to look at the legal side of confederation. If you think that there are not many confederations in the world, and probably the closest that we have is the European Union to something along these lines. And we see that the European Union is not exactly in a great state right now. So the question is how you resolve the legal issue of this. What are the legal mechanisms to have a confederation? For instance, security, who is in charge of security? If it's a two-state, it's quite clear. But in the gray area, what happens if there is an incident in a settlement? Who is responsible? The Palestinian security forces, the Israelis intervene, or you have a third mechanism, whether it's a foreign one or a joint Israeli-Palestinian, as we have to an extent now, or until recently. So all of this, again, the devil is in the details. What type of confederation? And we start, you know, talking to some international lawyers, but it stops quite abruptly because it's the situation now, people don't meet. And this is one of the things that I think it's worth discussing, it's worth exploring, and to see where it could lead. But it's in very early stages.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Yossi. Unless there are any other burning questions, I had a few, but I think in many ways they've been answered by sort of other half questions that have been asked already. So I'd like to say, Yossi, thank you very much. I've been held captivated, and there are, you know, sort of, I think the way you have put over all the issues shows very clearly all sorts of the problems that there are. But I think very clearly as well, you have put over that there is hope, that there are potential ways forward, that these can be worked out. possibly not with the current leaders that are there, but so there are possibilities. I mean, is that a question?
No, it wasn't a question. I was just congratulating Yossi on the presentation. I didn't ask any questions because I was happy just to listen.
Great.
Thank you, Amin.
Thank you. So, Satya, over to you. Thank you.
I also want to say thank you, Yossi. It was really fascinating and extremely helpful, I think, for many of us here. And just pointing out, like Bernard said about the going into the micro level, I think sometimes that's quite helpful because we kind of look up here and not kind of down here. So that for a lot of us, I think that's very, very helpful. So thank you so very much. Also, I wanted to kind of continue our conversation with FODIP. I want to encourage all of you to get involved and be involved with FODIP. We do have a website, www.fodip.org.uk, and this recording will be on our YouTube site, Yossi, so I will send you the link as well. So please feel free to share because it, you know, like I said, it's a fantastic opportunity for people to understand and listen and hear, and I think we don't get enough of that. So thank you again. We're also looking at developing a series of seminars and a training program, so we will be in touch with you about that. But if you are not on our mailing list, you might want to be part of that so you know what's going on and our upcoming events. So if you can contact me, that would be brilliant. You follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, and also if you feel like you want to donate to FODIP, do please do so. You can contact me or you can contact me through the website. And again, thank you so very much, all of you, for taking part and listening and asking the really interesting and questions that are, I guess, needed or are fundamental for us to understand and hear and listen. And I think one of the things I just kind of want to end on this is, I know we're talking about solutions, you know, we have talked a little bit about solutions. Unfortunately, we really don't have the solutions here, but we do have an opportunity to, like you said, not import the conflict here and to make sure that we work with our communities and raise that awareness, but also that understanding between each other. So I would like to kind of like leave it with that, and hopefully you can take away and learn something or maybe do something from hearing and seeing and being part of our conversation and be positive. And hope is sometimes when there's lots of things that, you know, don't seem to be going right, hope does kind of feel like it's very far away. But thank you so much for a very uplifting hour or so, Yossi. So I'd like to kind of finish it there. If anybody else has got any questions, then please do so, ask the questions. We'll stay on for a bit longer, Warren?
Yes, everyone can unmute themselves if they want to.
I will upload this recording on YouTube, so please look out for it.
And just thank you for inviting me and thank you for all your questions. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.